The ultimate keto diet. How to get shredded in just 30 days. Everything you need to know to lose 20 pounds of belly fat in just a week. Despite having so much information out there, maybe a little bit too much information nowadays, people are still struggling to get into great shape, to get lean, to get shredded. They commit themselves to a long gaining phase. They build a lot of muscle. They've done a really good job with that phase. But as soon as it comes to dieting, people lose their muscle mass or even struggle to get lean in the first place. And ultimately, you just end up undoing all of your hard work, and it's not because you're not putting in the effort, it's because your dieting phase is built on shaky foundations. So in this video today, I'm gonna be taking you through the exact processes that I've used on myself to help me get in the best shape of my life, get down to very low levels of body fat, and even win multiple bodybuilding shows, but also the same processes that I've used for hundreds of the guys on my team, get into the best shape of their life without sacrificing their muscle tissue. And to help you understand these processes just that little bit easier here and actually help you implement them, but remember them, I'm going to be using a little bit of an analogy here, which is constructing a Roman Colosseum. And that Roman Colosseum is your physique. So sit back, relax, get out your little notepad and pen and paper, whatever you want to call it, and let's get stuck into it. So the first step in drafting your design for your Roman Colosseum is setting the goal. Like, what is it that you actually want to achieve here? Do you want to go on a holiday and bring your best ever physique for that, which is obviously quite a common goal for people? Do you want to maybe even challenge yourself with a photo shoot or take it to the absolute next level and step onto a bodybuilding stage? By setting a goal, you know exactly what it is that you're working towards and it's clear within your vision. Now, whilst it's obviously important to think about what it is that you want to achieve, it's also super important to think about why you actually want to achieve that. Because motivation, it comes and it goes. But so long as you've got that why and that real reason as to why you're working towards your goals and why they're important to you, even on those days where you feel less motivated, you're going to get it done. Let's take me for example. You know, when I was younger, I used to avoid playing sports. I was embarrassed about being bad at things and I never got good at anything as a result because I avoided everything. Now, the reason why I challenge myself and push myself every single day and try and win bodybuilding shows, it's not just about winning, it's about proving to my younger self that when I work hard and apply myself and push through self-doubt, I can achieve these things. And maybe it's a similar reason for yourself, but you need to have that reflection period and that time to think about what it is that you want to achieve and why you want to achieve it. And when you attach that reason why, you'll never ever stop. Step number 2 is estimating your lean body mass and your target weight. Now that you know what it is you want to achieve and why you want to achieve it, we kind of need to figure out how long this project is going to take, you know, how long the Roman Colosseum is going to take to construct. So the first thing we need to do here is calculate your lean body mass. Now, there's no perfect way to do this. Not everyone has access to DEXA scans, and even they're inaccurate in themselves. So we're going to go through a very simple process here. Now, take a look at this chart, right? This is examples of different levels of body fat, and I want you to pick, based off of where your physique is at right now, where you roughly sit on this body chart. And that's going to give us a rough estimation of your actual body fat. For this example, I'm going to use 15%, right? We then want to take your body weight, which in my example is going to be around 80 kilograms, and we want to do a little calculation here in order to figure out what your lean body mass is. Now, if we take 15 as 0.15 and we then minus that from 1, that gives us 0.85. We then want to take that 0.85 and times it by our current body weight. So in this example, times 80, which gives us around 68. This is 68 kilograms of lean body mass, as if someone literally just came over and sucked all of the body fat out of your body. That is what we're left with, 68 kilograms. So now that we've got your rough lean body mass, we want to estimate what your final weight is going to be at the end of your dieting phase. Now, you can't just shoot for your lean body mass, because if you try that, you're probably just going to lose all your muscle mass in the process, or maybe even die, because you can't be 0% body fat. You do need body fat in order to function. Now, this is where you need to reflect on what your goal is. You know, are you stepping on a bodybuilding stage? Are you, say for instance, doing a photo shoot? Or maybe you just want to get in good shape to go on holiday and feel good. So if we look at the screen now, we've got some examples, right? So 6 to 8% body fat, this is going to be very lean. This is like competition territory, you know, getting onto a bodybuilding stage. Then anywhere from 8 to 10% body fat, you know, this is going to be maybe a photo shoot shape or more of an extreme transformation where someone really wants to challenge himself. But then you've also got 12 to 14% body fat. You know, these are for people that just want to get into good shape, go on holiday, feel confident, have some visible abs. You need to align yourself with your goals and be realistic with your goals. So for my example, I'm going to use 7% body fat because I want to get on that bodybuilding stage and I want to bring my best, right? So we take take 7, but we change it over to 0.07. Or if you were 10% body fat as your goal, then we change this to 0.1. We then take our 0.07 and we minus it from 1. That's going to leave us with 0.93. We then take our estimated lean body mass, in my case 68, and we divide it by that 0.93. This is now going to leave us with a number which is 73, and that is going to be our estimated final weight, the weight that I need to shoot for in order to get on that stage and be at around that 7% body fat in my absolute best shape. Now we're left with a realistic number that we can actually shoot for and not just some fantasy number that we think we're going to end up at. We've got a good estimation of what we need to shoot for. However, we now need to put a plan of action in place and what we need to do to actually get us there. Now, the third and final part of drafting your design for your Roman Colosseum is going to be setting the date for your project. When do you want to finish your construction? Because obviously right now, you know roughly what kind of body fat percentage you want to be shooting for, and you also know what body weight you need to be aiming for in order to get there. But how much time do you need to dedicate towards the process, and how much body weight do you need to lose each and every single week in order to get you there? Now, this is going to depend on many factors such as your genetics, where you're at in your training journey, how much muscle mass you have, how tall you are, but there's a few different things that we can do here in order to help you calculate that and give you a solid plan of action and some time frames. Now, the first thing we want to do is obviously figure out how much body weight you actually need to lose to get to where you want to be. Nice and simple, we just take your starting weight, which for me is, in this example, 80 kilograms, and we minus our goal weight, which is 73. This gives me 7 kilograms of body weight to lose in order to roughly hit my goal and get to where I want to be. Now, a general recommended rate of loss for your fat loss phase is going to be anywhere from 0.5 to a kilo per week, but this really just depends on how much body fat you do have to lose. Obviously for myself, in example, I don't have as much body fat to lose, therefore I don't need to push things as aggressively. Of course, more body fat means you can probably be a bit more aggressive with the process. But for this example, let's just use 1 kilogram per week. Now, in terms of the rate of loss that you should be aiming for each and every single week, it kind of just depends on where you're at in your training journey, right? If you've got more body fat, maybe you're obese, you can of course lose a lot more body fat, versus if you're lower on the body fat, of course, you need to be a little bit more reserved with things because you don't have as much body fat to lose. It also depends on where you're at in your journey. You know, if you're building muscle mass at the same time as dieting, of course, that's going to skew the data. But for this example, we're just going to use anywhere from 0.5 to 1 kg per week as our rate of loss, because that's just a healthy amount to shoot for that typically works well for a lot of people. So if my goal is to lose around 7 kilos and I want to lose it around 0.5 kg per week to take things a little bit slower, that would mean I need around 14 weeks to hit my goal. Now, it's also a good idea to add in a little bit of a safety buffer here, maybe 2 weeks, just to make up for time where potentially you're ill, traveling for work, family events, you know, things happen in life. Things don't always go to plan. So add in a little bit of a safety buffer here. So in my case, I want to lose 7 kilograms. I want to get down to 73 kilos, but I'm going to set aside 16 weeks in order to get the job done. Now, this leaves us in a really nice place because we know exactly what it is that we want to achieve and why it's important to you. We know what you want to look like at the end of your dieting phase, your ideal body fat, but also how much weight you need to lose in order to get there. And you know exactly what time frames you need to set aside in order to actually achieve those goals with realistic dates. So you can set that date in the future and get to work. This is pretty much everything we need now in order to finally get to work on constructing our Colosseum. Now, the next crucial step here in constructing your Colosseum is going to be laying the foundations for successful fat loss. We need to establish whether or not you're actually ready to start your fat loss phase in the first place. Because if you try and build a building on your Colosseum on rocky, crumbly foundations, the whole thing is just going to come tumbling down. Now, there's a few different things that go into creating that solid, strong foundation that's going to support your structure or your fat loss phase. And first and foremost, how much sleep are you getting per night? You know, are you getting in around anywhere from 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night? Because if you're not, if your sleep habits are terrible, and then you're then willingly putting yourself in a caloric deficit, which is gonna make you even more tired, you're just shooting yourself in the foot from the get-go. Are you actually eating enough food? So if you're trying to start your 16 or 14-week dieting phase and you're only eating 2,000 calories already, then where are you gonna go from there? You've got no room to adjust your food over time, and it quickly means you're gonna be diet fatigued and you're gonna lose muscle mass. fats. So make sure that you're eating enough food to fuel energy and fuel performance. Do you have a stable daily routine? You know, are you going to the gym on a regular basis at similar times each day, getting in regular meals, going to bed at a good time, waking up at a good time, making sure you're going out for walks? Like if you've got no structure to your day and it's chaotic, it's gonna make hitting your targets a lot harder. And if you're not hitting your targets, you're not gonna be able to achieve anywhere near as much fat loss. Are you doing things to manage your stress well? Because if you're going into a fat loss phase already feeling stressed, then it's gonna make things 10 times harder because you're not gonna be sleeping as well, cortisol is gonna be high, and fat loss is gonna be a nightmare. And this is kind of related to your daily routine. Make sure that you are managing your stress. Are you training productively and recovering well? Because if you're going into a fat loss phase and your training is not in a good place, your body is sore all the time from training, things are just not running very efficiently, they're only gonna get worse from there. And this is kind of tied in with obviously making sure you're eating enough food. So you wanna make sure that your training is to a good standard that's gonna allow you to perform well on a consistent basis and retain that muscle tissue throughout your dieting phase. Do you have a healthy relationship with your nutrition? Because going into a dieting phase, it can amplify a poor relationship with food, such as binge eating. So before you even think about going into a fat loss phase, you wanna make sure that you've got your ducks in a row and that your relationship with food is healthy. Now, if on reflection, you realize your foundations are pretty damn crumbly, we need to solidify them. In order to make that happen, what I'd recommend that you do is you run a priming phase. And this is what I do with a lot of my guys that join the team that want to lose fat. We need to make sure that you're in a position to lose fat in the first place. So what we do here is set aside anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. And the biggest factor here that we need is to establish your maintenance calories. And in order to do this, a nice simple calculation that you can use is take your body weight in pounds. So in my example, 190 pounds, and we times that by over 14 to 16. 14 is going to be lower activity, so maybe you go to the gym a handful of times, maybe you work a sedentary job in the office, not many steps. 16 is going to be higher activity, maybe you do some cardio, quite a lot of steps per day. You have an active job, you go to the gym quite a lot, right? So in my example, we're going to times it by 14. That leaves us with 2,660 calories. What we then want to do is run that for a week. If your body weight stays the same, we know that we've found your true maintenance. If it goes down, you know, in a deficit, so add in some food. If it keeps going up quite a bit, then you know you need to drop your food down just a little bit. But once you found your maintenance, run that for 4 to 8 weeks. That's gonna make sure that you're in the best position possible, your nutritional intake's being consistent, so that when you initiate that dieting phase, you're going to see a nice response and your training performance, energy levels are all gonna be in a fantastic place. But it also gives us that time that we need to work on the lifestyle factors, such as your stress, such as your sleep, such as your routine, to make sure that you are primed and ready and have the solid foundation that you need to chase after your fat loss. So now that we know you're 100% ready for fat loss, the foundations are laid, they're solid, we are ready for the next step, and that is erecting your pillars. Now, come on, right? It's a pillar. When you put a pillar up, it's called erecting it, right? That's just what it's called, whatever. But anyway, there's 4 main pillars that we need to focus on here, and that is your nutrition, your training, your recovery, and your activity. These are the main things that we need to put in place here, the pillars that are gonna allow us to construct our Roman Colosseum, okay? So the first one here that we need to establish is your nutrition. Now, the first thing we wanna do in nutrition is obviously establish the deficit to actually kickstart that fat loss. Now, this can be quite confusing for a lot of people. They're not too sure how many calories they need to drop by. So I'm gonna give you a few little examples here. Now, if you wanna go for a bit of a slower, more controlled cut, anywhere from like 10% of your calories is more than sufficient. If you want to do a moderate cut, anywhere from I'd say 15 to 20% is a good amount. And then if you want to be a bit more aggressive with things, 20 to 25% of a decrease from your total calories is a good amount to shoot for in order to really get things moving. Now, in my case, because I've only got 7 kilos to lose, I'm going to be a little bit more moderate with things. So I'm going to start off with around 15%. So if I take away 15% from 2,660 calories, which is my maintenance point, that is going to leave us with around 2,261 calories. That is going to be the starting point for my deficit. Now, when dieting, it's not all just about creating the deficit, although that's very important in order to obviously encourage fat loss. We also need to make sure you're eating enough proteins, carbs, and fats to make sure that you're performing and recovering to your absolute best, and therefore actually retaining the muscle tissue throughout your dieting phase. So here's some very simple formulas that you can use in order to help you calculate your macros. Now, for protein, we're gonna wanna make sure we're getting plenty of this in each and every single day, because you need those amino acids in order to help spare muscle and retain muscle tissue. So for myself, I'm a little bit more of a fan for going slightly higher on the protein intake. Now to calculate protein, use this very simple formula, right? Anywhere from 1 to 1.2 grams of protein per pound of body weight. So if we take 190 pounds in my example, and we times that by 1.2, that's gonna leave us with around 228. Now the reason why I've chosen 1.2 is because personally, for me, I'm a bit more of a fan of having more protein because I wanna make sure that I'm getting plenty of amino acids in to help retain muscle tissue, but also help keep me fuller for longer and satiate me throughout my dieting phase. Next up is your fats, which are very important for obviously hormonal health. So we wanna make sure that you are getting enough in. Just because it's a fat loss phase doesn't mean that you need to just crash your fats. So as a general rule of thumb, what I'd recommend that you do is dedicate around 20% of your total calories to your fat intake. So in my case, we're working with around 2,261 calories. We want to take that number and times it by 0.2, which is our 20%. That then gives us 452 calories. Now, because 1 gram of fat contains 9 calories, we want to take that 452 and divide it by 9. This then gives us 50, which is going to be our starting point for our total fats. Now, the final macronutrient here is your carbohydrates, and this is probably the easiest of them all, right? All we need to do is take your total calories for the day, in this case, 2,261, and we need to minus the calories from your protein, we need to minus the calories from your fats, and then you're left with a specific number. In my case, it's 1,051 calories. Now, because there's around 4 calories per gram of carb, we want to take that total of 1,051, divide it by 4, that then leaves us with 263. And that is going to be our starting point for our carbohydrates. So after all those super complex calculations, you should now be left with your starting point for your calories, but also your individual macros too. And just a final quick little note on your nutrition here is just focus on whole foods. Just because you're tracking your nutrition using MyFitnessPal, whatever it is, that doesn't mean you try and fit in everything and anything, even like cookies and stuff like that. Now, in general, whole foods are gonna be a lot more satiating, they're gonna be healthier, they're gonna keep you energized, and it's gonna make your fat loss phase a lot more sustainable. So stick to whole foods, quality carbs, quality proteins, healthy fats, and it's gonna make things a lot more sustainable and more efficient. Now, the next pillar that we want to erect here is your training. Now, there seems to be this assumption that whenever people enter a dieting phase that they need to ramp up their training volume. They need to start doing more in order to drive more fat loss. Surely more reps equals more fat loss. And that's literally just not the case. What built the muscle is going to help keep the muscle there. So in your gaining phase, you've spent so long progressively overloading, getting stronger. You want to carry that now over into your fat loss phase, because lifting hard and heavy on a consistent basis is going to be the signal that your body needs in order to retain that muscle tissue. If you keep doing more, adding in loads and loads of cardio to start off with, or adding in loads of reps, your recovery is probably going to go down. And if your recovery drops off, your performance drops off, therefore you actually start losing muscle mass. So keep it simple, right? Focus on logbooking your lifts and progressively overloading your exercises. Anywhere from 10 to 20 sets per week is more than sufficient. Remain consistent with your training, because if you're taking too much time off whilst you're in a deficit, again, that's then going to signal to your body to lose muscle mass. You need to remain consistent with your training. And don't just go replacing your training with excessive amounts of cardio. Like, your training is going to help to drive fat loss. The more muscle that you have on your frame, the more metabolically your body needs in terms of calories. Therefore, if your body needs more calories because you've got more muscle mass, it's going to help drive more fat loss over time as well. So don't go overcomplicating your training. Keep it simple. Train hard, train consistently, give that muscle a reason to stay. Pillar number 3 is going to be your activity levels. Now, this is super simple, right? In order to lose fat, it's a pretty good idea to move more, because when you move more, you burn more calories. And if you're burning more calories, you don't have to keep your food so low in order to establish that deficit. But as well as that, if you're moving more, doing steps, doing cardio, you're going to be healthier. And a healthier body is also one that's going to lose body fat and perform a lot more efficiently. So what I'd recommend that you start off with here is anywhere from around 8 to 10,000 steps per day as a baseline. If you're already doing 10,000 steps per day, amazing. Even just obviously dropping down your calories is probably going to be sufficient. I'd also recommend that you add in some light cardio. So this could be like 2 to 3 20-minute sessions per week, maybe an hour total per week of low intensity, steady state cardio. This is where you get your heart rate anywhere from 120 to 140 beats per minute, and you sustain that throughout the session. It's low impact on the body, it's easy to recover from, and it's just another tool that we can use here in order to burn calories rather than solely just relying on dropping your food super low. In general, I always just really recommend increasing your activity levels first before you go slashing your calories, because you need calories to perform. You need calories to have energy, and you need energy in order to drive fat loss. And if your food is just way too low, you're gonna find yourself diet fatigued. And when you're diet fatigued, you can't drive fat loss. So rather than just emotionally reacting to the scale weight and adding in loads of food drops, increase your steps, increase your cardio to a point that you can actually recover from in order to help drive that fat loss. But on that note, you also want to use your cardio strategically, not emotionally, because again, there's only so much we can actually recover from here. So if you feel like it's going to take away from your ability to be able to perform in the gym because you're doing so much cardio, so many steps, then it's probably time to action a little bit of a food drop. So don't use it emotionally, use it strategically. And the fourth and final pillar here as we construct our Roman Colosseum is going to be your recovery, right? It goes without saying, when you're going into a dieting phase, you are willfully putting your body into a stressed state. Your recoverability is not going to be as good as what it once was when you were eating more food, because food aids in your recovery. So we need to lean into other things here, even more so, to make sure that you're recovering to the best of your abilities and therefore performing to your best and retaining that muscle tissue. So first and foremost, just make sure that you're getting in around 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night, because obviously if you are underslept, you're stressing out your body, you're not recovering efficiently from your training, it's going to make your fat loss an uphill battle. You also want to make sure that you're managing your stress, right? Just like the foundation at the start, if you're starting off your dieting phase stressed, it's going to make it an uphill battle. As you get deeper into your dieting phase, things are going to get harder. And if you're stressed out of your ears, it's gonna make fat loss an uphill battle. So make sure that you're journaling, make sure that you're taking your downtime, scheduling it in, doing things away from work, away from the gym to help you decompress and relax, making sure that you're taking walks to get nice headspace, getting out in the morning, think about your day, plan your day ahead. There's many things that you can do, and obviously it's different for every single person, but just make sure that you're managing your stress throughout your dieting phase if you want efficient fat loss. And finally, schedule your rest days, all right? If you've got rest days, stick to them, because growth happens when you are resting. And if you're not rested, if you're going into your training sessions beat up, sore, unrecovered, guess what? You're not going to perform. And if you're not performing, you're going to be losing muscle mass. So make sure that you're sticking to your rest days. And when you do rest, really make sure that you rest, get in some good sleep, take it easy on those days off. So now things are moving really nicely. You've laid the foundations, the pillars are getting put up, everything is coming together as a good construction project should do. Your Colosseum is really starting to take shape. However, every now and then, even the best projects may come to a grinding halt. And this brings us on to our next point here, which is navigating plateaus along your fat loss journey. Now, if your progress stalls despite perfect execution, you've been really putting in a lot of effort here and your recovery has been really good, but for some reason you just haven't seen any progress for maybe 3-4 weeks, then it may be time to action a little bit of a diet break. Now let's just frame your diet break as like break time for the workers, the guys that are constructing the Colosseum. Give them a cup of tea, a biscuit, or whatever they would have back in the day when they built Colosseums. Give them a rest so that they're then ready to continue their work. Now a diet break is super simple, right? All you want to do is dedicate around 1 to 2 weeks for this phase. That's enough time to really have the body feeling refreshed. Now in terms of your food, bring it back around to around your maintenance point. So for me, around 2,660 calories, our original starting point before we initiated that deficit. Then from there, half your cardio and bring your steps to around maintenance. So let's say, for instance, 10,000 steps, reducing it down from 12,000. And if you've been doing, 3 lots of half an hour of cardio, maybe bring it down to 3 lots of 15 minutes of cardio. Therefore, you're eating more food, you're moving less. This is really going to help to refresh that body, but then also give you more room to be able to then increase your cardio and decrease your food once the diet break is done. Throughout this time as well, really focus on your rest days and your sleep and your recovery, right? We really want to make sure we're doing everything that we can to refresh the body and make sure that when it's time to actually initiate fat loss again after that 1 to 2 weeks is up, you're feeling fresh, you're feeling energized, food has been in a good place, and you're ready now to chase after fat loss. Sometimes in order to speed up fat loss, we actually need to slow down a little bit. Now, just because your fat loss has plateaued, that doesn't mean you need to jump straight away to having a diet break. And in fact, we can usually get away without them if we run our dieting phase very well. Only incorporate a diet break if you notice that your training has really dropped off, if you're struggling to recover from your training, if you're struggling with your sleep, digestion has taken a hit, mood has changed. When you see multiple symptoms like this, that is when a diet break is useful. However, if you've noticed that you're still feeling pretty damn good, but for some reason, like your fat loss has just slowed down, then we need to increase the deficit. And we can do this by three things. We can increase your activity, we can increase your cardio, or we can decrease your food. Now, we want to be a little bit more strategic about how we actually create a bigger deficit. Rather than just slashing our calories and really taking things to an extreme, make small little adjustments over time in order to encourage that deficit. So if fat loss has slowed down, maybe decrease your carbohydrates by around 25 to 50 grams of carbs, 100 to 200 calories. This is going to be that little bit of a push forward that you need to be able to keep that fat loss going. As well as that, slowly trickle in some more activity in the form of your steps, 1,000 at a time. So maybe go from 10,000 steps in the first 6 weeks, and then you go up to 11,000 steps, 12,000 steps, and so on and so forth. And with your cardio, make small increases over time as well. So maybe go from 3 20-minute sessions to 3 half-an-hour sessions, and then from 3 half-an-hour sessions to 3 35-minute sessions, and so on and so forth. Small incremental increases over time when you reach plateaus is always going to be way, way more efficient long-term for fat loss than making big emotional extreme changes, because they're just going to lead you to being diet fatigued, low on energy, and not achieving any fat loss at all. So rather than making extreme emotionally driven changes, just take your time. Small incremental changes over time are really going to allow you to sustain fat loss without experiencing diet fatigue. Now that you've learned how to navigate your fat loss plateaus, we can finally move on to the final step, and that is adding the roof, or as I like to call it, the diet after the diet. You've just spent months putting in the hard work. You've laid the foundations, constructed all of your pillars, and now you're finally happy with the position that your physique is in and the condition that you're in. So now we want to put the roof on top in order to protect the structure, your physique, underneath. Now, this is where a lot of confusion comes in for people, right? How much food should you now be eating? How many steps should you be doing? And how much cardio should you still be doing on a weekly basis? Now, the way in which we can do this is super simple. We want to run a reverse dieting phase. So all of the things that you've done throughout your dieting phase in order to create a deficit, we essentially want to undo them. We want to do the opposite here. So if you imagine a seesaw, you've spent so long in a deficit. Down here, this is your deficit, right? We want to bring that seesaw back to around a maintenance point. And there's a few things that we need to do in order to make that happen. The first thing we want to do is decrease your activity. We no longer need to have super high cardio or super high steps in order to drive fat loss. We just want to bring them down to a baseline. Maybe that new baseline is the same as at the start of your dieting phase. 10,000 steps per day, 2 to 3 20-minute cardio sessions per week in order to maintain cardiovascular fitness. Next up, we want to increase your calories, and we want to do this gradually, okay? So every week, typically add in 100 to 200 calories, week after week after week, until your body weight stabilizes. As for your training, it stays the same. The goal is always to get stronger, it's always to progress. So stick with your same training program. The only difference now is you're gonna be getting in more food, so you're probably gonna be able to get stronger. Now, it's important to note here that your body weight after a dieting phase is always gonna fluctuate. It's gonna do some funky things. This is where you need to focus on trends long-term rather than daily fluctuations. And ideally, what we want to achieve here with a reverse dieting phase is to see your body weight maintain whilst you're increasing your food. And once you've reached a good place of your calories where you're feeling energized, training performance is improving, you're recovering well, but body weight is pretty much staying the same, you know that you've found your new maintenance point. But one of the most important factors here is actually having a goal set for yourself even after your dieting phase. Because if you finish up with your diet and you're not too sure what it is that you're working towards next, whether it's another lean gaining phase, lifts and performance targets that you want to achieve within the gym, if you don't have a good idea in regards to what comes after your dieting phase, you're just gonna spin your wheels. And when you spin your wheels, try and maintain a lean condition for way too long and you don't actually progress towards anything else, you're probably gonna end up losing progress from staying in the same spot for way too long. And also, you're not gonna be as motivated as what you need to be in order to work towards something else. So set some goals for yourself way before your dieting phase is even finished and then get to work on them. So guys, that pretty much concludes it for this video. You now have every single step that you need to actually get into the best shape of your life, get shredded whilst retaining that muscle tissue. Rather than just building your dieting phase like a house of cards, this is how you build it like a Roman Colosseum. But if you're still struggling or feeling confused and you want all that brain ache of managing your own dieting phase taken away from you and you want to learn how to do the process properly, then simply just head to the first link in my description there, submit an application to work one-on-one with me on the online coaching team, and I'll be back to you with a response letting you know exactly what it is that we need to do to take you from where you're at right now to where you want to be with your physique related goals. And if you enjoyed this video, obviously hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, all of it is greatly appreciated, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.